Welcome, everybody. Today's episode is a special one, not because of headlines, but because of heart. We're joined by Jay Trombley, a member of the Crosspointe Church security team. He found himself at the center of a moment that no one ever hopes to face. The day an armed individual showed up at his church intent on doing harm. In that moment, Jay's training, judgment, and courage were tested in ways few can truly understand. His decision to act saved lives, but it also changed his own life forever. This conversation isn't about sensationalizing what happened, it's about learning. It's about preparation, the weight of responsibility, and the realities that come after a critical incident. Whether you're part of a church security team, a law enforcement officer, or someone who simply wants to understand what it means to serve and protect others, this discussion is for you. So let's step into this conversation with humility and open minds as we learn from someone who's lived it firsthand. Here's my interview with Jay. Jay, I want to thank you for being here today. I'd like to start by helping our listeners understand what led up to that day, the training, the preparation, the mindset that equipped you and your team, as well as what the aftermath looked like for you. Before we get started, I want you to know that if you need to pause or break at any time, just let me know. Also, if I ask any questions that you're not comfortable with answering, let me know. We'll skip it. I will respect your wishes in that regard. So let's go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you, Justin.
All right, so now I have quite a list of questions, and I don't know that we'll ask every one of them because some of them may be redundant depending on your answers to other ones. And
Okay.
If I have follow-up questions, I'll bring those up as well.
All right.
So, Jay, could you start by describing your role on the Crosspointe Church security team?
At this time, I am the ministry leader of the team. So I've been the ministry leader for several years now.
Okay. And so how long have you been involved in the church security before the incident took place, whether the leader or just in general?
It's been about a decade now that the team has been active at our church.
So what initially motivated you to join the team or become part of it?
I've always been, just before the safety team. We refer to it as a safety team now. Originally, in the start, it was a security team.
Right.
For the simple fact that it was starting out, church security was the
Primary goal.
Yeah. And as we've grown, we've realized that, okay, you know what, we need to look at not just people who may come to do us harm. There may be other things. There's, building problems. There could be severe weather problems, simple issues with simple injuries and stuff like that. So we changed the name to a safety team. But I just was always the one looking around, and because before this I was on what we call the Ironman, and we do the maintenance in-house on the building and the church facility.
You and I had talked about that before, where you pick a bunch of guys and go in and fix a bunch of stuff, basically.
Yeah. So I've always been the one who, I'm always looking around, and just it made sense to go ahead and when the safety team was started, to be part of that, to just take care of the people of the church.
Right, that's fair. And regarding the safety team aspect of it, I'm a strong proponent of calling it a safety team rather than security, and I have been pretty much from the start, because like you said, it's not just about security. You also have medical, you have like a bunch of different things that you got to be concerned with other than just the security aspect. So what kind of regular training did your team do to prepare for emergencies? Did you have like regular trainings in different areas, or what did that look like?
for quite a while, we would have a monthly meeting and some sort of refresher training. As the team originally started, there was a lot of initial training that we was made available to us, whether it be first aid, de-escalation, firearms, just whatever we could, absorb.
Right.
And as of late, we haven't done as much as we should have, but
Which is ironic. You would think after an incident,
right,
step
right,
up a bit.
And so that's something that I need to get working on and get more involved. We have some newer members that haven't had some of the original training that we have had, and I need to get some more members on our team. Our team has dwindled over the years,
Right.
and not a lot of people have stepped up to
That's
join.
fair. And I think that kind of happens at a lot of churches. Your church is not exclusive in that.
It's one of the most boring ministries that you could be involved with.
But that's a good day.
That's a good day. It was absolutely boring. That's a perfect day.
Yeah. So did you have any prior experience in law enforcement, military, or security prior to joining the team?
None whatsoever.
So how did the team approach firearm proficiency and use of force training? I know you mentioned that there was a bit of training. Like, how did they approach that aspect specifically?
The initial leaders of the team, the gentleman that brought the concept to the elders of the church leadership, their initial, years ago, the state of Michigan had a qualification for an advanced CPL class. And that was the initial qualification to carry a firearm in our church.
Right.
And since then, we've modified that several times to different qualification programs.
Right.
And then just we had a range available to us that we would
always a good
go
thing.
train at quite regular.
Yeah. So did you do a lot of scenario-based drills or active shooter simulations with your training as well, or?
We have had a number of them, yes, through different training organizations that we worked with, yes.
So what about communication? How did your team coordinate communication or plan to coordinate communication during the services, or if there was an emergency?
We have a radio, a group of radios that we all use with an earpiece and a small microphone that you can either put at the end of your sleeve or clip on your shirt.
Right.
And we've been using those for about a decade now, and they work good.
I love the idea. I'm sorry, I wasn't laughing. I mean, I was, but I love the idea of clipping it to the end of your sleeve. Like we also have microphones, and we have it clipped up here. But I love the idea of this is.
We did have several people that they did do the thing. I never was for me. I just like clipping it right here.
Yeah. I'm the same way, but I do. It's almost comical, the vision of doing that.
There were several people that did that.
So what was the process of recruiting or vetting members for the team?
To be honest with you, I wasn't involved in any of that. That was prior leadership, and I haven't had any strangers. Let's put it that way. Anybody we didn't know real well that has joined the team since then. Everybody who's come on has been through, somebody we've known
Right.
for quite a while.
So do you speak to people personally, like go out to somebody and say, hey, I think you would be a good fit for our team. You seem to be interested in the.
We have done that in the past. Yeah, we have. And then some are just younger guys that have come in and their family to other team members.
Right.
And have son-in-laws, and several of us are, my son-in-law's on the team. One of the other fellas, he has two son-in-laws on the team. They're some of the younger guys.
So it's kind of a family affair.
It is. It always seems like churches, you get that,
Right.
half the band is related and half the security team is related somehow. Or, so it's a lot of that.
We're the same way. We have plenty of family. So did your church leadership, did they provide resources or input in how the team operated, or did they kind of leave it to you guys to decide how everything goes? Or
The guidelines for the initial safety team, again, I was not involved in the initial setup of it, but yes, there was things that they had to back and forth.
Kind of coordinate.
Yeah. There was things that, and there was people who were not initially on board with the firearms, which you get that with a lot of churches,
Right.
from what I understand.
Yeah, and I just, kind of on a side note, I just visited a church and did, actually, you and I had briefly discussed it a little bit a couple Saturdays ago, where I went out and I did the presentation at that church. And, of course, I asked them if I could, if they had an issue with me carrying, which they didn't. But when I got to the church, I did find out that their denomination does not allow firearms. So I was kind of surprised that they said, yeah, go ahead and carry.
I've also visited that church myself, and one of my other leader of our team, we did talk to them, and was, after being there for quite a while and having discussion, that was when I was made aware that their denomination doesn't allow the firearms. So.
Yeah, and it does sound like it's something that may be open for discussion, whether now or in the future. So hopefully that does change for them.
It's a sad situation that we have to have that discussion.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And we understand that the mindset, but as much as we hate to say times are changing and you have to adapt to them,
times are changing and you have to adapt to
them. Yes.
Yeah. So how does your team balance the security mission with maintaining that welcoming atmosphere that, for the congregation and for everybody else that may be new coming into the church and that kind of thing?
Well, we, we're playing close. If you look close, you'll see that, we have an earpiece. We have lanyards with a identifying badge.
Right.
And, it can be tucked in your shirt or it can be out. Never had a negative reaction from anyone. People appreciate the fact that.
I was just going to say, you probably get a lot of.
And we've been getting that for years. People are like, well, thank you for taking care of and watching over us. And after there's been other instances somewhere in the country, in the past years, people are really, they appreciate it. They know that you're taking the time to do that.
So what role did teamwork and trust play in the preparing for the critical moments?
I just, so many of us have been doing this together for so long, and we've trained together, and, just that we know each other. And, we've been doing this together for so long. It's something we don't really think about. It's
kind of comes as second nature.
We are the safety team, and we're a group, and we do what we do. And it after a decade of nothing happening, it just became we had gotten a little relaxed. We were in a flow, and we just watched for things.
Right.
And
And that actually brings up an interesting point that I don't think I added with my questions, but how do you prevent that? How do your guys prevent that complacency? Do you rotate shift or rotate people out of into different positions or?
well, we have 3 different teams. So you're on for a month and you're off for 2 months.
Oh, that's. I wish we had enough people to do that.
Originally we had 4 teams, and we had at least 5 members on each team. Now we're down to 3 teams, and many of us are on all the time.
Right.
So we're way down on numbers, and so many of us are just on all the time. And if we're not on duty, a lot of people will mic up and be in service.
Right.
I myself, I'm always on. I'm usually in the service somewhere,
Right.
or either sitting in it or watching in the sanctuary. But no, our numbers are down, so some of us are always on. And just with being the lead, it doesn't matter whether I'm not on. I'm mic'd up. Many of us just mic up every Sunday.
Right. Were there specific warning signs or behavioral indicators that you were trained to watch for? Like, were you taught about like what to look out for as far as behaviors or that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, we've always been, the watch for somebody who seems nervous, who's, looking around
Fidgety.
too much or fidgety. There's it's the gut instinct is something that is a genuine thing that they always talk about. And
I think anybody who's in security or an officer or anything like that, I think they teach you that gut actually really matters a lot more than people give it credit for.
Mm-hmm. But you hate to say it, but if you see somebody that you're not familiar with, and they have that's nervous looking and stuff like that, that really raises a flag. And with a smaller church, everybody. So when when you see somebody who's new, naturally you're going to look at them, talk to them, welcome them. The welcoming crew, will usually say hi. There's always somebody who spots a new face that even if they're not on, well, hey, how you doing? It's good to see you, so and so, and so that's something that your greeters really are your first line of defense. And that's something I'm thinking about, having a meeting with them and telling them that, it's something we need to have, and it was brought up in a meeting here not too long ago by some of the greeting staff, is how do we convey to the safety team that we have somebody that's...
Now, so that kind of leads into another question. Is your greeter staff, are they part of the safety team at the very least, in that they know what kinds of things to look out for? Like they have that training of, hey, if this person comes in with this behavior, you should pay a special attention to that?
I have not had that discussion with them, but actually the meeting I just referenced was last weekend. And it is something that I'm looking to go forward with, and try to bring in the greeting ministry. Either address them, have them come to a safety meeting, and address them on, these are what we need to start looking at.
So how do you personally prepare yourself mentally before each service or event or anything going on? Like how do you get yourself ready to be a part of this, to be in that safety atmosphere, to have that safety mindset and spiritual mindset at the same time?
I don't know that it ever gets shut off.
That's fair.
That's
very fair.
these days I don't know that it ever gets shut off. When we arrive and we're getting mic'd up and we discuss and share anything that we've heard through the week. I don't know that I actually never stopped thought about how I prepare. It's just there.
Yeah.
I'm in the building multiple times during the week for
Right.
different stuff, and it's just always on.
And I think, in all fairness, I think most people who carry a firearm on a daily basis or on a regular basis, that level of situational awareness is always a part of their daily life because of that very reason. Just out of curiosity, does your team meet like a while before people start coming in and pray over the service, or is that something you guys do or are considering?
No, everybody's kind of usually wandering in. It's if people are there by chance. But no, I don't say, hey, everybody be here at this time.
Right.
People are there for different times. They have different activities and, kids and, this guy might be here early because his wife is practicing with the praise band, or, so no, I don't have as long as they're there in time. We don't have, usually most of the team will be, the whole team will be there for the service.
Right.
Not everybody would be there for Sunday school beforehand, every time.
So now you answered this when we were talking beforehand, but I got to ask it here. Did the team ever bring in outside trainers or law enforcement or advisors for instruction, which I know you did? Can you tell me a bit about that?
We, in the early days, had a lot of, as the team was being set up and growing and starting, we did have quite a bit of training. We worked with an officer from the Downriver area on 2 separate occasions with, it'd be like situation scenarios with simunition firearms. And once in his facility, once at our facility. We've had a training organization from California, SRST, came out, and they are top-notch trainers, and they were here for 3 days. Many of our team members then again, a few years later, we did another 4-day with them. That wasn't a church sanctioned event, but it was, we paid for it out of pocket and had them come out. And we did it with our families, but many of the people who were there were also team members. We've had some hand-to-hand combat. We've had many. I can almost sometimes I don't. You'll ask this question, and then I'll be driving home and go, I forgot to tell them about that person we trained with, and this person, and no, we've had quite a bit of training available through the years.
Right. So how often does your team, or did your team, review or update its emergency response plan?
Well, through our meetings, which have fallen off, which is my fault, we would usually go through something once a month and talk about something. And as we learned more, it would be discussed and brought up at meetings. We would listen to something from another incident that you didn't think of that before.
Right.
And just this year, this past year, there was different scenarios that we'd never thought of. So it was just more stuff that we had to start
That Grand
breaking in.
Blanc one, just everything all at once. Bombs, fires,
Right.
guns, just everything. Man.
So last year, starting with our incident, and within like a 3-month period, I believe, there was 4 acts of violence that mainly started outside
Yeah.
the churches.
Which
And
was unusual because prior to that, a good majority of them start inside.
right, and that was, our mindset that we always thought of was it. Now, we patrolled the parking lot.
Right.
We always had somebody in the parking lot watching, and our building has a parking lot on each side, so you had to kind of, back and forth,
Yeah.
which left you open.
Your building is huge, by the way. I
Yeah.
stopped by there that time.
And so, but, with our incident and then the down south and the Minneapolis and the Grand Blanc, we had always been focused on something bad happening in the sanctuary.
Right.
And it was a real. We'd never trained for the situation that happened to us. That scenario hadn't really crossed a lot of minds, and then to see it play out 3 more times within several months, really changed the mindset of a lot of people.
Right.
So it's a learning curve, It's a learning curve.
Well, and they always say, no matter how much you train and prepare, there's always going to be something that surprises you.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, it's just it was very eye-opening.
Yeah.
So it makes you think of, okay, what else can happen?
So were there any particular challenges or limitations that you or your team faced in terms of like budget or manpower or resources? I know you said you're a little bit lower than you'd like to be on manpower right now, but like budget or resources, I know a lot of smaller churches, those are issues that they commonly run into. Did you guys face anything regarding that kind of thing?
So as of late, the manpower is the biggest issue. As our team was building, we were, I don't want to say we had a endless budget, but there was a lot of, the budget was there for the training and equipment. We do have a lot of equipment for doing hand-to-hand training and other things that we've acquired to do simulation, just training.
Right.
And then we would provide for range days. We would provide the ammunition so that you didn't have to get that out of your pocket.
Right.
And so everybody, we took care of all that. They've always done that. So it's been that hasn't been a challenge. Our biggest challenge was the trying to be able to get everybody together on the same time to train when you have so many different...
Or meetings, I'll tell you, that's what we run into a lot of times is getting meetings together. Most of the time I have to do it like after church or say, all right, have everybody break when church is over and then come back an hour later, something like that.
Yeah, so that's the biggest challenge.
So, did your training how did it emphasize in things like de-escalation or non-lethal options? What did that look like? You've spoken a lot about the different, firearms training and that, and which obviously is important. Did you guys work on any sort of like de-escalation options or non-lethal?
So in some of the training in the past we'd had that there was training on de-escalation. I look back now and realized we probably haven't had enough of that. As far as there's more resources now
Right.
to learn and to train in that,
Yeah.
and that's something that we need to look forward to or
Look into.
into.
Yeah.
As far as the less than lethal type, we have not dealt with any of that.
Right. And I
that-
think, honestly, I think most churches don't, we're not officers, so we're not prepared to handle things away with the same level that they are, like, police officers. So this is just my opinion, and I'm gonna, discuss it a little bit. Because somebody asked me this the other day. They asked me, have you ever considered less than lethal? Like, and I said, I can understand its place, but here's my viewpoint on it. Less than lethal is great if you know what you're doing. Most of these people are volunteers with no background in anything. So I would rather give them the chance of ending the situation rather than have them try and use a less than lethal, make that decision incorrectly and end up dead because of it. So I'd rather them err on the side of caution for their lives and other people's lives, basically. And it's a sad world we live in where it comes down to that, but at that point, it needs to be a fully lethal option. If you can't de-escalate, it needs to end.
Yeah, that's something I never really thought too far into. I know we discussed that previously, and yeah, that would be something to really think about. But then equipping your whole team with it,
Yeah.
and before long you're gonna you start getting all that kind of equipment. Before long, you're gonna end up looking like a cop standing
Right.
there. It's hard enough to keep everything honest now. With radios and all the other stuff that you carry.
You don't want to be wearing a duty belt. Like, I've
Right.
got a pair of handcuffs, but I don't ever wear them because it's just too much. But
yeah, no,
but yeah, and like I said, most people are not trained. That's just one more training. It's better to keep to bare minimum, which means, unfortunately, lethal options are your best way to go. It's your most survivable chance.
and not all of our safety team is armed.
Right.
That's not a requirement of our team. Eyes and ears, and so first of all, you need to spot your threat,
Right.
and then just to help out with the crowd and stuff. It was never a requirement. It wasn't an emphasis to carry a firearm. It's just being able somebody to know what to do how to react when a situation starts.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm a strong advocate of not everybody needs to be armed. In fact, there's people that want to come on the team that can't be armed for one reason or another. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be on the team. There's plenty of other areas, medical. You could have somebody who is very good at communication, so maybe they're the ones that de-escalate or that help people calmly get out the doors if necessary, or maybe they're good with relaying information, so maybe they should be the ones to specifically call 911, because in an emergency, it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about it, somebody else is going to get it. Well, if everybody says that, then nobody gets it.
Right.
So, in hindsight, which part of your training turned out to be the most valuable that day?
Unfortunately, I would have to say probably the firearms training. And just probably, quite a bit of it all played a role. It was just that we'd had enough of it that there wasn't a lot of thinking that had to go into it. It was reaction.
Muscle memory.
It was muscle memory. It was just heard a noise as people came towards me from where the noise came. There was messages relayed.
Right.
Some of them I don't even remember people talking to me.
Right.
And then just going towards the sound of the threat. Although I originally thought, I just went towards the sound of the noise. And one of the people that I encountered as I headed towards the noise told me exactly where the threat was.
Right.
I still don't remember talking to that person. I actually put my hand on her shoulder as I went by. She's told me. And I don't remember that at all. That selective stuff your brain does.
That kind of tunnel vision.
And the things that your brain does in those situations, it eliminated that, didn't keep it.
Right.
And I didn't know that till several weeks after actually discussing it with her, that she had come through the door and told me exactly where she saw the person, and I was going past her, put my hand on her shoulder, she told me. I don't remember it.
If you, one last question of this section, if you could redesign your training based on what you now know, what, if any, changes would you make?
Well, I think the one change we've made is definitely keep an eye on the parking lots, the perimeter
Right.
of the building, to see catch the threat before it gets in the building.
Yeah.
As we've seen, so many of these attacks over the past year have been, immediate violence on the outside. They weren't people who were inside and then stood up and started causing a problem. Yeah. And we've never had that. In the decade we've had nothing.
Right.
Until June 22nd. We've had some scrapes and stuff, and we've had some kids missing on in some of the events we've had, people lost sight of their kids, and
right.
Quite funny, several times they were both security team members, kids that we ended up looking for, but we used to have quite the festival there for a while.
Yeah.
And so that, the watching the outside has been our biggest thing now.
Just kind of extra boots on the ground outside now.
Yeah, to watch.
Yeah. All right, so now, Jay, I want to move into that specific day, and this is, let me put this out there, this is not to sensationalize what happened that day, but to help others understand what it's really like to face that moment that nobody ever truly wants to face. Can you take us back to the day of the incident, what started as a normal day, and when did things start to feel off?
So things were a little bit different on that Sunday. We had VBS the prior week.
Right.
And with our week-long VBS program, the kids are learning songs and dances and all that stuff. And so on the following Sunday, everybody's invited back to the kids get to perform 3 or 4 of their songs. Our praise and worship band gets the weekend off.
Right.
And the kids get to do their songs and the dances they learned and the motions and the stuff. The stage is usually still decorated in the theme of of the VBS theme, and it's it's a fun Sunday.
Yeah.
You end up with a lot of people who wouldn't normally be at your building.
Yeah.
Grandparents that don't attend the church, or aunts and uncles, and
Even a lot of times people in the
community,
yeah.
that there's people that their church, they might go to a small church that doesn't do a VBS,
Right.
so their kids come. So a lot of unfamiliar faces in the building that
Yeah.
day, or ones you see once a year or so.
Yeah,
And-
we get a bunch from this because right on the other side of the fence, I'm sure you notice, is that whole big apartment complex, and we get kids in from there that don't normally come, that their parents never come, but they'll come out for VBS.
Yep. So, what was the vacation babysitting? So that was a different Sunday for us.
Right.
So it was, it was fun, a lot of people, and the kids had just got done and were just coming off the stage when that was the first indication, was when we heard the first burst of gunfire.
Did you know what it was right away? When you heard it, did you know immediately that it was gunfire? Not before you you were inside, correct? And you were.
I was in. So you come out of our lobby and kind of go. There's a hallway. To your left is the sanctuary. To your right is our cry room.
Right.
Glass on either side of the hallway.
Yeah.
Knee wall, 4 foot high. The sanctuary has 3 openings from that go in, no doors. In the center of that hallway would be the center line of the sanctuary, I guess. There are double doors that go into the cry room. You can also enter the cry room out of the lobby.
Right.
I was standing in front of those doors looking into the sanctuary. And actually my son-in-law, who's on the safety team, was standing next to me.
Right.
And we were chatting a little bit. And I heard that noise. My initial thought was a pipe hammering. Now, I said earlier that I'm on the Iron Man crew, which is our group of guys that we do the maintenance on the building.
Right.
The noise came from my left, and so it was kind of like a pipe hammering, and I turned because all of the utilities are that direction,
Right.
from where the noise came, and but as I turned, I could see through the glass. I could see a young lady running. And I just grabbed that door behind me and opened it up and asked, what was that? And I could also see her husband was standing up. They're in there with two little ones. And he was part of the safety team also. He wasn't on that day. But I see them moving away from, there's a closet in there that has some duct work and stuff. So my brain real quick was, problems of utility, havoc. It was hotter than hot that day. And I opened the door. I said, what was that? And I remember her saying AR-15. I don't remember everything she said, but I remember the AR-15 part.
Which was probably the most important part.
Right. So, at that time I was, I think I was reacting and heading towards the door back into the lobby. That's when Carol, the woman I was referring to a little while before that, came through that door, and I don't remember that interaction, but So it was an immediate, there was no, it was, we hear the noise, within seconds, I'm told it's, a guy with a gun.
Right.
And so I knew from what Carol had told me exactly where he was. So I was able to run right out in the lobby and go to those front doors.
Right. So when did you first see the assailant? Like what drew your attention? You knew where he was, but what actually caused your focus to shift specifically to him?
So initially, as I go to the doors, the front doors there don't get used. They're the front door of the church, but they're just about as far away from the parking lot as you can get. They don't even get unlocked.
Right.
And it's all grass. There's a sidewalk coming from the west, and then there's a sidewalk that runs directly north out to Glenwood.
Okay.
As I come out, there is a truck, a pickup truck, right there.
Yeah.
And it looks to be smoking or something. And then I look down, and there's a
Was that your usher that had run him over, or was
deacon. He was a deacon. Yeah. At this time, I don't know any of that.
Right, right.
There's a truck on the front lawn, and then I notice this man on the ground, sitting on the ground, sitting up. I looked around. I opened the door, but had the mindset to hold on to the door, because if it was shut, it would have been locked.
And you would have been outside.
Right.
Right.
As I had entered the sanctuary, well, even before I came out of that hallway, I had my weapon drawn. And I was standing outside the door with my weapon drawn, looking at this fella, the back of him.
Right.
I was still, evidently my brain was still trying to process what was going on.
Yeah.
At that time, there had been one burst of gunfire. This man was in like camo tactical gear. Mm-hmm. Don't know at the time. I did at one point look out into the front yard and could see someone in the front. I recognized who it was, and then I went like, okay, that's his pickup. That's Richard's pickup.
Right.
The burst of gunfire that we had heard had been fired into the front of that truck. Right. And that's the reason the truck had stopped there and was smoking. My brain evidently was processing and trying to decide what to do.
Right.
At some point, it told me to go back in the building. I turned and headed back in the building, and at that time, while I was doing that, another safety team member who had been sitting pretty much right on the aisle, center aisle, halfway up, had come out into the lobby, drew his weapon as he was crossing the lobby, had stopped inside the lobby just about where there's glass doors, glass panels either side. So he was looking at what was out there.
Right.
He was looking, assessing
kind of
what was going on, trying to decide who this guy was, good guy, bad guy, because he almost had the SWAT look. It was
kind of like the same thing you were.
Yeah, so I don't know that I was thinking that. I was still just trying to, but somehow something told me to turn and head back in. And as I turned and headed in the door, he swung around with his rifle and shot through those two panes of glass. Down low, up high, he kind of strafed through. I don't know if he went low and then back up, but there's shots down low through tablecloths. There's holes in the ceiling down the hall. There's impacts on the wall here. There's impacts on the wall. You know, there was a lot of impacts, high and low, through that, from that burst.
Was his rifle semi-automatic or was it automatic? Did he have some sort of like bump stock or?
I believe it was, somebody told me they've read the report, is that it was an automatic weapon. So as he swung through and fired, I was getting away from the doors. I didn't realize I had ran as far as I did until I saw the security footage. But as I was coming through the doors and he fired, our other safety team member who was standing there was hit in the leg.
That was the one individual that got hit.
Yes.
Outside of the suspect.
Yes. He was the only church member that was injured.
Right.
He spun around and hit the ground and managed to get himself partially into the hallway, but he still had a visual
Right.
on the suspect. I came back around, and I had in my brain, I remember seeing the individual shooting to the west. I remember looking through the window and seeing him silhouetted against the pickup truck firing west. It wasn't until recently, discussing with other people, that I had the time frame of when that happened.
Right.
He was actually firing at another safety team member who had come out around the west end of the building. He was not on that day, but asked if we wanted extra help, and I said yes. And he was actually had just mic'd up and was getting himself a cup of coffee on the west end of the building, and he heard the initial gunfire that went into the pickup, came around, and as he was coming down the front of the building was when he fired. The gunman fired into the lobby at Ron and myself.
Yeah.
My son-in-law had just made it through. If you watch the video, Ron and I come out, Ron came out, and then my son-in-law, you can see him running through with a phone in his hand,
Yeah.
and evidently a pocket knife too, because he wasn't armed at the time. And he had just made it down that hallway before the gunshots came into the lobby.
Right.
After he fired into the lobby, the other safety team member that was coming down the front of the building engaged him. And that's when he fired back at him down the front of the building,
Yeah.
which resulted in all the damage to the building
Right.
that everybody saw in the news. And then he took cover. Well, he had fired at him and then took cover behind an AC unit, and that's when the man fired back. And that's about the time that I came back around to the windows and engaged him.
Right.
And then the whole thing was, I don't know that it was a minute.
Yeah.
It happened that fast. It was over.
So while all this was going on, like what was going through your mind, and do you remember it? Like, is it sharp memory or is it more of a blur? Like, it sounds like you have memories of certain aspects very clearly, but other parts surrounding the main event, so to speak, are a little more blurry. Is that accurate?
Well, some of it I know because I've watched the security footage of it.
Mm-hmm.
Other pieces are visuals that I've had to piece together in conversations with other people,
Right.
the timelines.
Right.
So two thoughts. I remember thinking two things through that. As I could see the end of his barrel and he was shooting into the lobby, I remember thinking I was going to die, or could die.
Right.
Because like I said, the glass was shattering, I could see the muzzle flash,
Yeah.
and I knew he was firing at me and whoever else was in there. As I turned from my retreat and came back along the door, and evidently at that time he was firing the other direction, and I was engaging him. I remember as I was engaging him, I thought, poop, this is happening to us. I don't think poop was the word, but I vividly remember thinking, this is happening to us.
Yeah.
And then it was done. I don't know how many rounds I fired. I know it wasn't a full magazine. And I stopped, evidently assumed that he was down, and then went out, I turned to check on Ron. He was hit, but he was still he was on his elbow, but he still had his firearm, and he still had both hands on it, and had an eye on the guy.
Yeah.
And I then went out the doors and cleared his rifle from him, got it away from him, and then
Now, had he expired at that time, or?
I don't believe so. I don't.
But he had obviously been hit enough times
He had
too.
been, yeah.
Like he had been taken out of the.
He was.
out of the
I believe
picture.
he was out of the fight. Yeah.
Right.
Because his rifle was laying across his chest,
Right.
and I, very cautiously got up there and got the rifle from him, put it on the other side of the sidewalk, and as I started to study him was when, I don't remember him coming down, but the other gentleman who was behind the AC unit came down, and as I was watching him and looking, that's when I realized he had a sidearm too. And I don't remember if we had a discussion, but the other team member knew I was going down to get the sidearm, and he put a foot over him. He didn't put a foot on him, but he put a foot over him in case he moved,
Right.
so that he could put him down. And I was able to, it took me a minute to figure out how to get, or, it took me a little bit to figure out how to get his sidearm out of his holster.
Right.
And then I removed it from him. While this was happening, people were coming to attend to Ron, who had been hit. Everyone had headed out the east side of the building into what we call the orchard, the large field
Right.
yard on the east side
Is
of
that
our
where all the
building.
deer always are?
Yep.
Okay.
And some of them, they were running right clear out into the woods, heading for the Rouge River. Guys I was told that some of the women that didn't move so well of many birthdays were, picked up and carried. But one of our safety team members, who would have been sitting to my right in the back corner of the cry room, young ones, he's got young kids, he got up as people started headed out the east side. We're heading for the east side of the building to evacuate. Drew his firearm, went out, cleared the area on the east side of the building to make sure there was, to check to see if there was anybody there.
Right, a second shooter or something.
So he cleared that area, evidently was confident, and then he came back in, or came out the front of the building to where we were, and maintained cover until law enforcement showed up with us.
Right.
Several other young men and other people showed up to help work with Ron, who had been hit, and get him taken care of. And then we turned around and there was police there immediately.
Right.
There had been 2 phone calls to 911 made as the man was getting out of his vehicle. He was spotted getting out of his vehicle with the rifle. So
Is that what made, I forget his name, the one with the truck,
Richard.
Richard decide to put his foot on the gas pedal?
So
basically?
he was, from what I understand, he was the man came in, drove into the parking lot very fast from the street.
Right.
From what I understand, tried to do a couple donuts in the back of the parking lot, open area of the parking lot, and pulled up and got out of his vehicle on the west end of the building. And what I understand, got out of his front seat holding the rifle, but then set it on the ground, put a vest on, and put on sound savers, and then picked his firearm back up, his rifle.
So in other words, it was clear what his intent was.
Yes.
Right from the jump.
Richard, from what I understand, was out of his vehicle, seen this happening, actually called out to the guy, and he ignored him. He just looked at him and then proceeded to walk down the front of the building.
Right.
And so Richard knew he had to do something, and he had, and he knew the only thing he could do. So by the time he got in his truck and headed down the sidewalk after him, I don't know where the point of impact where he hit him, but evidently he didn't hear him coming because he had sound savers on, and he was, I assume, hit from the back. The hood of the truck was damaged. He was hit hard enough that the hood of the truck was damaged.
Right.
But he landed in front of those 2 glass panels to the west of our front door.
Right. This, what emotions do you recall having? Was there, you had mentioned a bit of fear, I don't know if it was necessarily fear, but I'm gonna die type thought. What about adrenaline or focus or calm? What stood out most for you?
I remember being, pretty tense, what happened. I do remember, I don't know how many minutes later it was, trying to help the law enforcement get into our security cameras. I couldn't even hardly get the door unlocked to get the door open to where our monitor was.
Right.
And then trying to punch in the password to get in, I was having issues with that,
Yeah.
So I was pretty hyped up on adrenaline,
Right.
And disbelief, I think.
Yeah.
And then just trying to figure out what's going on. I remember running to the sanctuary to see what's going on there. I remember running outside to find my family. I remember, and I can't, my phone starts ringing. I'm getting calls because the other fellow who's, leads with me wasn't there.
Right.
But his son texted him right away, shooting at church. And that was all he's texted him, One of our past church leaders, good friend, he heard about it. He's at a church in Canton. He heard about it immediately. He's on the phone to me.
Yeah.
And
I was surprised at how quickly the news of it spread. We heard about it over here, almost immediately, within just I don't, almost immediately, like I said, and we weren't sure at that time because we were getting very limited information. So we weren't sure if it was like a coordinated thing or an isolated thing because, we had just had all those threats coming out of Dearborn. And we're like, well, is this a Dearborn attack? So we went on to a soft lockdown, double checking all the doors, making sure everything was locked down and, careful about who we let in and out. So the news of that happening spread a lot faster than I've seen a lot of other news spread.
Well, the night before there was the action overseas, and I remember watching the news that morning and the news actually said that because of the action overseas, they thought that the threat could
Spill over.
spill over
Yeah.
onto our soil, radical groups or whatever.
Right.
And that I do remember thinking that is that part of this?
So is that actually went through your mind?
Somewhere along the line in there, I don't know immediately, but
Right.
until we didn't know why anything had happened.
Yeah.
It was not until later that night that we were starting to find out,
Started getting the information.
started getting any information. Yeah.
During the incident, when you were actually taking the shots, returning fire, were you able to assess like your angles, your backdrop, like what was going on, potential risks to others? Like, were you able, or was it more of a, again, kind of muscle memory? I just knew I had to end this person at pretty much all costs.
I don't know if I thought I knew I was at close range and I was firing down. So backdrop wasn't
It wasn't really an issue.
really an issue, but I don't know that I would have taken that into consideration.
Right.
I knew this was
Emergency.
This was right now. I literally don't know. I knew I wasn't hit. I didn't think I was hit.
Yeah.
I don't know that I ever thought I was hit, but this was mere seconds after the bullets were going past me.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I thought much about anything at the time,
Right.
besides taking that shot.
So I'm guessing that you didn't have, like, at least in the moment, you didn't have a lot of internal conflict between, possibly ending a life versus, and desire.
No,
to act
that
or
I don't.
anything.
None of that was there. It was just I knew, like I said, when I was holding that door and looking, I was still trying to figure out. But when the shots were coming at me, it was, there was no doubt in my mind that this threat had to be taken care of because he was there to hurt people.
Right. Now, you briefly touched upon this. What kind of interaction did you have with the responding law enforcement at the scene, and did they treat you as a suspect at first, or just as like part of the response?
So, what I'm assuming happened, I haven't read the report. I don't know how in-depth the reports get, but I know that there was 2 calls made beforehand.
Right.
Law enforcement was on their way before the gunfight actually happened. As the 3 of us, the 2 of us that had actually engaged in the gunfight, the 3rd safety team member who had come from inside, were just kind of there covering him.
Yeah.
The law enforcement came around the front of the building. Big guy was standing here, I'm standing here. The other team member who engaged him was right here. Well, we had been to a Protect Your House of Worship class 3 days beforehand. And one of the things, one of the things that had been reemphasized was, identifying yourself to law enforcement if there's an incident.
Right.
And the fellow who was standing to my right had his security badge and was covering him, but he was holding it like this.
Right.
Not that I think they would have been able to read that as they were running up from around the building.
But the fact that he was holding it
You
kind
know,
of gave implication.
I'm also under the impression that they were getting a play-by-play of what was happening, 911.
Right.
I believe.
So somebody probably still stayed on the phone with them.
I get the impression that my son-in-law, who had, just made it through the lobby before the gunfire,
Right.
I believe he was on and given the play-by-play that the man was down and that our security team was covering him in the front yard. Right. So I'm guessing that they already had that information.
So they kind of had a better idea of what they were walking
Because
into.
I was surprised that they ran right past us while we still had weapons on the man and went right to him.
Right.
And it's in a security video that I watched that I can see I finally said something and we all came back to the ready and then holstered.
Right.
But yeah, they had just ran past us and didn't say anything to us.
So how long, and this may not have, this probably hasn't even fully happened, but how long did it take for you to emotionally process, at the very least, not get over, but process what happened that day, like to really come to terms with it, I guess?
You know what? I don't think I fully answered your last question.
Okay.
Let me go back to that. So, law enforcement treated us fantastic.
Good.
They were great to us. They, unfortunately, some of the reports they had of a silver vehicle, a man with a silver vehicle. It also happened that the fellow that hit him with a truck had a silver vehicle. So, unfortunately, Richard got handcuffed in the front yard.
Oh, jeez.
And brought in the building. And at one point, I came up the hallway and saw Richard in handcuffs and kind of lost it, yelling at the cops, and I was, told to sit down and relax for a minute. And it wasn't very long before they got that straightened out.
Right.
But he was very shook up because he had seen all this and he had, a rainbow of round holes through the windshield of his pickup where he was sitting. So he had just gone through a burst of automatic fire, had just filled his truck while he was in it. But they were super to us. They were we got them into the security cameras. We have a 16 monitor system, and I'm telling them, okay, look at this one and this one and this one, and I was saying this and this and this, and there was a hand grabbed the back of my shirt and pulled me out of that doorway that four of us were trying to stand in, and I was taken out in the hall and said, all right, stop talking about what you just did.
Right.
Help us figure out what we need to do. Help us with these cameras. Help us. Give us the guy, I told them who, I was the safety team leader, and they're like, help us figure out what we need to do, but stop talking about what you just did.
Right. And I'm guessing that was legal protection, basically.
Yes. He's like, he says, yes, we all have cameras on. He says, but, 4 different people are going to say 4 different things of what you just said.
Right.
I'm like, okay, fine. Yep. I remember that from, all the training we've had with dealing with these type of situations.
Yeah.
So, and actually, as we're out in the hall, away from that room, before long, there was 4 officers there. And, my immediate thought was, well, by that time, I think by that time I had been outside and seen my family.
Right.
And I ran back inside from them because as I was talking to my family, my wife noticed smoke near the building. And I thought it was smoke coming out of the eaves, so I thought maybe there'd been some damage and there was a fire in the attic or something. It was actually on the other side of the building from where we were. The truck was on fire. But I had ran back in to, say, hey, we got a fire or something, and that's when they said, no, it was the truck. And I looked and, okay, yeah, all right. I didn't make it back out to see my family again.
Right.
Somewhere in there, and I think we ended up in this security monitor room. But as I ended up out in the hallway talking with that first officer, there ended up being 4 of them there. And I had already told my wife, I says, I'm probably going to get arrested. I don't know how long this is going to take, but be
prepared.
Be prepared. I'm probably going to go to jail for a while. And I knew that, there was a couple hundred people outside the door, and most of the while, I says, hey, when you guys arrest me and take me out of here, can we not go in front of the whole crowd? And the one cop in some very colorful language says, you're not getting arrested, you're a hero. And so I'm like, well, okay, well, I'm glad you think that, but I don't still, legal, I don't know why I thought of that at the time, but they were all.
That is something that is always instilled, like when you go for your CPL, that's one of the first things they tell you. If you're ever in an incident, 99% of the time, you're going to get arrested.
Yeah.
And be prepared for that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, and that's why it's very, very important to have a legal defense readily available.
Right.
And I had, I know very, very shortly after it happened, I did call USCCA and let them know what was going on. And they were going to get a lawyer in contact with me and get the ball rolling on that. Like I said, I made several phone calls I received several phone calls from people. I made a phone call to my employer because the person who I answer to, I've been working with for 18 years, and she's a worrier. And I knew as soon as she saw that on the news, she would have known it was my church, and she'd have been worried sick. So I actually called her too, and I says, "You're going to see some stuff on the news. My church was just attacked. I was involved in a shooting, and I don't know what's going to happen, if I'm going to go to jail, but if you don't, I says, I know you're going to hear it, so I'm just letting you know." And she was like, okay. But no, law enforcement was super to us. I'm sorry I didn't get all the way through that.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Let's go on to that. What's your next question? What did they ask? But
yeah, before I do, interestingly enough, my parents, my father and stepmother live in Missouri. My mother and stepfather live in Rhode Island. My dad and stepmom, they've been to this church. I got married at this church, so they knew this church, but apparently they didn't know the name. I got calls from both of them asking me, because they all know I'm on a safety team. They said, "Was that your church?" Blah, blah. So they saw it on the news. So you're not the only one that has people that,
Yeah, but no, everybody was super. At one point, they were asking me and the other fellow that were engaged, you guys all right? You need to be checked out. And the other fellow, he, a little bit older than me, and he'd had some heart issues where he's like, well, yeah, I could, well, I guess, So they set him down and they asked me, did you get checked out yet? I'm like, no. I said, I'm fine. We're going to check you anyways, So he sat down in a chair, and I sat down in a chair right there in the lobby. And first thing was there was like 6 firemen lined up in front of me, and then just shook my hands before they were, anything happened, and afterwards, as I talked to them at various events, in the time not long after that, they were like, one of them said, "Thank you for saving them from walking into a really horrific situation," because you think about it, that law enforcement, that fire department, what it must be to walk into a scene where there had been, a mass shooting and stuff. And they're like, "Thank you for saving us from that,"
Yeah.
So they thought about it,
And
So
that's an interesting perspective. That's not something you normally would think.
Yeah, you wouldn't think about it. I ran into several weeks later and went an event in downtown Wayne, and one of the firemen said that to me, paramedics.
Yeah, so no, what I was asking is, like, how long did it take for you to emotionally process, like, what exactly actually happened? Because I know when you have, like, a burst of adrenaline, you're not really thinking about all different aspects. Like, how long was it before it clicked? What just took place?
I think it was pretty immediate that, what had just happened, what I had just done. I think it was more the uncertainty of why.
Right.
Why did this happen? Why did this happen here?
Yeah.
I calmed down and there was so much activity. I wasn't sure what to do afterwards. I was like, I'll keep a low profile. And so the next day, the next morning, first thing, we all went back about 10:30 that night. It was that late before they released the scene.
Yeah.
And, everybody had run out of the building, purses, wallets. We couldn't get our cars because they had evacuated the whole piece of property.
Right.
So we went back, and there was an hour of process in seeing the church family that night. That was, I think that was the good start of the healing. Just everybody being able to go back up there and see each other.
So the healing really started that later that night.
It did for me because I got to see people and I knew everybody. I knew nobody got hurt,
Right.
but it was just to see people.
Yeah.
To see those people that care so much about.
Do you? This isn't in my questions, but I'm curious. Do you think that your congregation, having all kind of gone through this together, do you think that strengthened the bond? Because with smaller churches, like you said, everybody knows everybody, and for the most part, you're friendly. Do you think it made that stronger, having had gone through this all together?
I believe to a certain extent with some people, yeah. There's randomly I'll be standing out there and just get a hug,
Right.
from somebody I don't normally, it's not, that way with. And there's still people that, tell me, they say they turn around and they see me standing there in that spot where I'm usually standing, and it brings them peace, so. But they've also told us that, said that, she also said she turned around and I wasn't there one day and it made her anxious. So, but it's definitely built a bond with certain people, especially our team,
Yeah.
is really, and the fellas who we were involved with. But I do think it's something that we have all lived through together. Mm-hmm. And it was you wouldn't think that the bond could be much stronger than, if you've known these people for so long. I realized this past year that it's like, I remember when that kid, when that girl was a baby, or that kid was a baby, and we're hanging out at their graduation party. I'm like, I've known these people. These are like my kids,
Yeah.
I've known them for so long, I've known these people forever now, it seems like. So, there's, I think, and we had some families leave afterwards. We've had some people start attending afterwards.
Right.
They're like, if evil has to go to that level to attack this church, there must be something good happening here. So, no, there's definitely a good bond there.
Well, and I think there's something also to be said for the fact that evil was stopped before it even stepped foot through the door versus another church like, in Grand Blanc where it made it all the way in the doors.
And I've had a thought on that, and I don't know if it's, I'm definitely not a biblical scholar. But the thought has gone through my mind. Events like ours don't typically end the way they do.
Right.
Very seldom do they end the way they do.
Yeah.
And after our event, it seemed to be a dramatic increase in the longing for information and the development of church safety seemed to explode this past year.
Right. Well, and you and I had talked about that a little bit when you came out for the one that I had set up through USCCA.
Yep.
You said that you had been to a few others and the groups were a lot larger. And even the first one that we did prior to the one you were there, I was surprised at how many people showed up, because usually you would think there'd maybe be a handful, 10, 20 at the most. We had, 5, 10 at the most. We had, I forget what it was. I want to say it was close to 50 people, I think, at the first one. The second one was a bit smaller, but a little more time had gone on.
As the from what I was told, the Protect Your House of Worship class we attended was the first one that USCCA had done in the East region.
Right.
And there might have been 15 or 10 or 15 people there.
Yeah.
Three members from our safety team were there. All three of us were involved in this incident. 2 of us engaged him, and the other fellow was the one who was hit in the leg. And the instructor of that class, several weeks later, they offered that class out in the New Hudson area there. And I talked with them, and they gave it twice that day, and they had pretty good attendance. Actually, one of the fellows from our team, the fellow who'd been hit in the leg, went with some other people he knew from other churches.
Yeah.
And they sat in that class. And then I got off work and snuck in after the class had started. And then that class was being offered a lot after that.
Yeah.
And they would be full. I would sneak in, and those classes would be full. And so the thought had crossed my mind, and I don't know if that's it, but with us winning that battle of good and evil, was it meant as an inspiration so that if you put a team together and you train and you put the effort forth, you can win this battle.
Right.
Because it's not going to get any better. And we saw how many incidents there was after ours.
Yeah.
very quickly. So I'm like, was our event meant to
Be that inspiration.
strengthen the fortification for the churches?
Right.
Just our event, to see how things went, how people who weren't normally where they would be that day,
Yeah.
how it wasn't a normal Sunday. We didn't have Sunday school that morning. How the deacon came late because he didn't have to be there before Sunday school to bring donuts that day,
Yeah.
and how my fellow team member, had decided to mic up late. He and his wife were actually on the way to church, and she decided she wasn't feeling well, so she didn't come that day.
Right.
So he decided he'd mic up and go on security, and just how God placed us in just the right spot to be able to fight that evil.
Right.
We were just everybody, Richard right there and John right there, and I was standing in the spot I was always at.
Yeah.
But just how we so many things. The kids were just coming off of the stage, and it was a little bit later than they normally would have been dismissed, and they would have been walking through that lobby. So many things. God's hands were in so many things in the preparation for that.
Right.
And the just how many years we'd been building to that day.
Yeah. What would you say is the most misunderstood aspect of what it's like to face a deadly threat in a church setting or church atmosphere like the one you faced?
I don't know. I never really thought of it. I think our biggest thing was we had never considered that happening the way it did.
Right.
That's a difficult question to answer because I've never really considered that. It's I don't know how to answer that question. To be honest with you.
That's fair. I mean, not all the questions have answers. All right, so Jay, once the danger was over, another chapter began, one that doesn't get talked about enough. So let's talk about what came next, the investigation, the emotional impact, and the lessons that continue to shape your life today. So what was the immediate aftermath like once law enforcement took control of the scene, like the overall scene? You spoke a little bit about your interaction with them, but what was the overall feel and the overall look regarding that?
So they, from what I was told, talking with law enforcement and fire rescue, they put out a general call alarm, from what I understand, when it was reported that there was a man with a gun going into a church. And from what I understand, that law enforcement was notified from all the surrounding communities and all the EMS units.
Right.
I was told by one of the paramedics that there was multiple ambulances coming. The gentleman I talked to said he was coming out of they were just getting back in their squad, and he was from the Wayne Fire Department, and they were close, and
before they got there, they were then notified that there was one injury out of the whole thing. So it was, they stopped most of the rescue squads. I believe
Right.
Maine and Westland both showed up. But the law enforcement was from
All over.
every place, every place. And there was even a fella from Pittsfield Township who lived in the neighborhood,
Oh, gee.
heard the gunshots, grabbed his
Oh,
tactical
wow.
gear, and came to the scene. Was, you know, arrived. I don't know if he came by on foot or if he came around the corner in his vehicle, but I do remember talking to him.
Yeah.
But you know, Glenwood Road was full of law enforcement.
Yeah.
So they, as things started to calm down immediately, they did. We surrendered our weapons to them.
Right.
They took possession of that. They more or less assigned an officer to be with us. They didn't set us anywhere. They didn't put us in a cop car. They didn't, you know, they were just with us.
Yeah.
As we, you know, kind of wandered the scene. The fellow that I was with, you know, somewhere I'd come up with a bottle of water. We were talking. He's like, "Hey, I want to walk out to my truck and get my water." And I'm like, "Sure." And we both start walking right out the front doors. And we kind of looked at each other. We stopped and both looked at each other and says, "We probably shouldn't walk out through this. This is probably a crime scene right here. You know? Can we get back in that door?" I'm like, "Yeah, you know, I got keys for everything." And just, you know, conversation with him.
Yeah.
They pulled him to do some drone work, and one of the Wayne officers, I believe her name was Sylvia. I ended up hanging out with her, and they didn't make any indication right away that they were going to take us to the station or anything,
Right.
and or when they were going to start doing any questioning or anything. They were just kind of hanging with us, and we were just, you know,
Yeah.
watching what was going on, and then they evacuated the building. The bomb squad, the dog hid on the guy's vehicle because there was so much ammunition and stuff in it.
Oh.
So then they, you know, evacuated us all to the east side, and we all stood out there in the heat and for seemed like hours. But they were super. They were nice to us. You know, then they did to get us. They took us down to the station, to the Wayne station, and we were just kind of hanging out. You know, they gave us a chair and you know.
You're
I could
talking
pretty
about
much-
the one on Michigan Avenue?
Yeah, and we could pretty much, I could see Richard and I could see Steven, and you know, we were pretty much, and then other people who had witnessed stuff were coming in, and after a while they, you know, they brought us some food, they brought some pizzas and some pop in, we all had a chance to, you know, we couldn't talk about what had just happened, but,
Right.
and we weren't in big conversations, but they,
But none of you were in cuffs either,
No,
or
no.
you know, in trouble of any sort.
No, I had called USCCA immediately and was expecting a call back from representation from them, and it wasn't until they said we were sitting outside, and then there was discussion between all the officers and whoever. They finally said, let's just take these guys to the station and get out of the heat. I don't know if that was their original intention, was to take us down there
Right.
or not, but I think what I remember of the conversation is, let's go get in some air conditioning someplace, because we couldn't go back in the building.
Yeah.
And so that's when we ended up down there. And it wasn't until I got in the back of the police car that I realized I had not heard from my representation yet. And so I called USCCA back, and I talked to the same lady, and she's like, "Oh, he should be getting a hold of you." And she tried giving me his phone number, but I had nothing to write it down with. And I'm trying to punch it in somehow in my phone, and I end up hanging up on both of them. You know? Or, you know, and I'm like, "Oh crap," you know. And then he called. My
Yeah.
lawyer called me, and I says, "They're taking me to the station." And he's like, "I'm already sitting in the parking lot."
Oh, so he actually came there.
He was on scene within an hour
Oh, wow.
and was trying to get on scene to get to me,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't let him on scene. And so he had waited down there, and then evidently he got word that they were taking us, everybody involved,
Yeah.
down to the Wayne station. And so he was already down there in the parking lot waiting for me. And I had my phone the whole time, so I was able to, text back and forth to him, talk to my family and other people, and I was actually on Facebook and looking at the news and seeing what was being said, and going, "Nah, it didn't happen like that." And so they were super to us, and I was the last one they spoke to. It was like 5 o'clock before they finally, because I kept asking, "Can I talk to my lawyer? Can I talk to my lawyer?"
Did the police, at any point, did they get to the level where they read you your Miranda, or because of how everything went down and what they knew about it, did they just not feel that was necessary, or?
If it that did happen, it might have been before I gave my statement, but I don't remember doing that.
Right.
Maybe when we sat down with my lawyer and I sat down with the detective,
Yeah.
maybe that was.
But it sounds like they.
Nowhere along the line did any of that. Like I said, the one fellow had told me to stop talking.
Right.
And, we stood out there for quite a while when I was standing there with the Wayne officer, and somebody before the building had been evacuated had gone into the gymnasium and rolled out a rack of chairs for all the people that were sitting in the field. Thankfully, they were able to get out and under the trees and be in the shade.
Yeah.
And her and I stood there forever, and I could see, one team member over there and another team member over there, and I finally looked at her and I says, "I'm going over there and getting some chairs." I said, "Do you want one?" I said, "You can tackle me if you want, but I says, I'm going up by the building and getting chairs." I said, "I'm tired of standing here." And she's like, "No," she says, I could sit down if I wanted to. I said, "Yeah, it probably wouldn't look good, right?" I said, "I understand." But I grabbed two, because John it's the same thing, and I didn't walk over to him. I just kicked it open and set it down and said, "John, here you go," And no, they were, I don't ever remember hearing that.
So it sounds to me like they knew that there weren't going to be charges filed against any of you. Like, from the sounds of it, all they needed was a statement just talking about what happened, how it led up. One thing you mentioned, they took your firearm, which would be expected. Have you gotten that back yet, or is the investigation still ongoing?
The investigation was closed. A while ago. I had one time the detective called me to let me know that he had my pocket knife. We had sat at the police station for quite a while before somebody realized that one of us had a pocket knife.
Right.
So they said, "We should probably take all your pocket knives," and so. And I forgot to get it back when I left that day. And he called me months later and said, "Hey, your pocket knife's still sitting on my desk here," and I never did go get it. But they, I'd asked him about it, and he, at that time, and he figured it would be closer to the end of the year before we heard the end of the investigation.
Right.
It was maybe October,
Okay.
November, that we were told that the
Go pick up the-
investigation was closed and there would be no charges filed.
Right.
It just had to go through the prosecutor, the whole investigation, and the prosecutor, I think, Now, somebody else told me that they read the report and that somebody, I don't know who, but they refused to issue a warrant. I don't know what that all means in legal terms, but
Right.
you know, I guess it was, you know, in this situation there would be a warrant naturally.
Yeah.
And I guess somewhere along the line, whether it was, you know, immediately or whatever, but it was refused to issue warrants for us.
That's unusual,
Yeah.
but
And as far as-
understandable given the,
Yeah.
you know.
And as far as my firearm, I have not retrieved it because I have to set up an appointment and stuff like that with them. I know that at least one person has managed to get it, but no, we will get them back. I
Right.
just haven't been down there to set it up yet.
Right. How did your church leadership, how did they respond to you personally after the incident? And not just leadership, but also what was the congregation's kind of reaction in the days and weeks following the incident?
So, you know, immediately it's, you know, hugs and tears,
Right.
you know, and favorable, you know, as the pastor gave interviews, you know, he spoke very highly of you know, of us and the training that we had and the years that we had put into to taking care of something like this, you
Right.
know. So nothing but praise. Like I said, that night there was, and I don't know how long it took before everybody figured out what had happened. You know, I know they were all out there in the field for hours. I don't know if the word went right through that what had happened, that, you know, they went out and got Ron's wife immediately and brought her in. So I'm sure there was, you know, through the crowd, I knew that Ron had been hit. I don't know how long it took for everybody to realize, you know, what exactly had happened. Because even the news reports for the first couple days weren't quite real accurate.
Yeah, they they sold the Martin nowadays, but
And so Tuesday night afterwards, they did a pretty discreet gathering of our church, so that media wouldn't be involved. But Hillcrest, over here off of Wayne Road,
yeah,
offered their building, and then another church, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, it may have been part of Hillcrest, but I believe there was two churches. They put together a meal and a time for us to gather. And we showed up in there a couple, you know, not right as everybody started to gather, but and I wasn't familiar with the people over there, and I apologize to Seth that I walked in and there were several people standing there. I believe the chief of police was standing there, and I seen this guy standing there. It looked like he might have belonged there, and I said, is it all right if I said, I'm carrying, I said, are you someone with authority in here? And I said, all right if I carry in your church? And he's like, yeah, I'm kind of in a little bit of authority. I didn't know it was the pastor of the church, but
right,
I walked in, my wife and I walked into the sanctuary, and I think she might have even walked in before me. And everybody was kind of coming in the one door, and there was already quite a few people in there. And I walked in, and the place, you know, erupted in applause and people standing up, And
Was that something you expected?
no, I didn't expect to walk into that room and people to stand up and start applauding and stuff, And, so everybody knew. And I don't even know how many know now that I wasn't the only one engaged in him.
Right.
Originally, I didn't realize that our other safety team member was engaging him.
Right.
As he came down and we secured the weapons from him, he didn't tell me that he was firing at him. I had the original impression that I was the one who stopped the threat,
Right.
who had fired on him. I didn't know that the other member had. And it wasn't until I did an interview on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
My lawyer thought it would be a good idea. And he knew the reporter and knew that it would be he would not spin it in a bad way.
Right,
He would,
right.
Give us positive light. And it wasn't until that interview was done, and I had literally just got done watching it on the TV. Well, I didn't know that other team member had used his rights of waiting 24 hours before making his statement.
Mm-hmm.
He had been to the station, but then decided to wait 24 hours to give his statement.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. So the first day and then the first interview, I believe everybody, thought I was the one who stopped the threat as far as firearm involvement.
Right.
And like I said, I don't know how many know the difference now, because that team member didn't do any interviews. He wanted to keep a
low profile. You and I had spoken about that a little bit.
He was concerned because of where his location was, that he may have a different circumstance than myself.
That makes sense.
He was like, I was outside. I didn't have to engage him.
Right.
He was, so he kept a lower profile. So, but no, everybody's, they're appreciative. The cars
Right.
and
So,
letters and stuff.
with that said, and you don't have to tell me who, but do you know who was the one who ultimately ended it, or is it kind of we don't know which one of us did it type thing?
No, we do not know.
So it could have been a combination of both of you, or it could have been more hits from one.
From what I understand, he passed from gunshot wounds.
Right. So wounds
he was-
multiple then.
But the report evidently doesn't contain the coroner's report. I guess you'd have to see the coroner's report to see if it's broke down into
Right.
to who might have So, and that's something I wasn't sure whether I wanted to read the report and know that.
Yeah,
I had my initial thought was I did this.
Right.
Then I found out, well, there was, so do we want to know? There was two of us engaged him. Do I need to know? Was it both of us? Can they pinpoint?
Right.
And I'm like, I don't need to know that.
And in that respect, I almost think it's better not knowing for sure. It's like, firing
Right.
squads, so only one or two people have the actual
Right.
bullet, but everybody think that way you at least have that out, that mindset of having an out. Well, I didn't end a life, that kind of thought. And, there's a chance that it wasn't you that did it, which, even though there's a chance that you did, does that kind of it makes it a little easier. From my opinion, I
yeah.
mean, you would know better than I do, but
I'm not. Like I said, my initial thought was I did this. Then I realized, well, no, there was two of us engaging him. And then I thought, do I want to read the report? Because it may give a pinpoint.
right,
But from what I understand, reading the report, that's not in the initial. From who told me who had read into it, they said it's very thick.
right,
So at this point, it doesn't matter to me. I know I was involved. I know in my brain there for a day or two, I took responsibility of having to do this. And like my first interview I did, I have a good friend that I've known since I was 5 years old, and we talk pretty much almost daily on the phone. I'm truck driving, he's truck driving, and we chat,
yeah,
And he was like, he says, I watched that interview with you, and he says, that wasn't the person I know. He says, you're, I could tell that you were, really struggling with what had happened. And I know I was trying to be very careful with what I said during that interview.
right,
I was very guarded with words. But as I did interviews, I did that interview, and I'd even asked my pastor, firsthand. I'm like, I was asked to do an interview. He's like, that's up to you, just, make sure you give glory where it's needed, and, don't do anything to make us look bad, which is, and that's why I asked him,
right.
So afterwards, I'm hearing from people that was a great interview, and you gave glory to God and how things happened, and why everybody was where they were, and how much. So I found that with every interview I gave, and looking back now, I was also catching it at the time. I was saying things that I hadn't thought of.
Right.
And it may have been Wednesday afternoon, Thursday. I'm sitting at my kitchen table, talking to my phone, doing a phone interview. Don't remember who with. I think it was a national type organization, news organization or something.
Yeah.
And I was telling them about, how, God had placed, Richard there late, and how, and just how God had put us all in the perfect spot to defend this, and how he chose us, how God chose me to be there that day. And I said that, and I'm like, I heard myself say that. And I was like, God chose me to protect them people. Put me right there to do that.
Right.
And I remember, just stopping for a second, and I could feel the tears start coming and stuff. Just the realization that, we were chosen, I was chosen to be right there to defend all the people. And that was, at the time it was very, very heavy to actually,
Wrap your head around that.
wrap my head around it, me.
Yeah.
So, but, like I said, the more I gave interviews, and then I realized that now, okay, I've got a voice, and I've got a couple minutes, I've got 15 minutes, and maybe I can, talk about church safety and training and what we're here to discuss. and people will hear it, and maybe, as I discussed with, I was in Wisconsin at the main headquarters, and I was discussing and talking about it, and I said, well, I got my 15 minutes of fame, so I'm gonna, talk about it. And Steve from USCCA he said, all those meetings you're going to and all those people that you get up and stand in front of, and he says, that 5 minutes down the road, that one person that you hear, or that hears you say that could have an impact, that they're 5 seconds ahead of where they would normally be, and they may stop something like this.
Right.
You'll what you're saying and talking to these people could have an impact to stop this somewhere down the line again.
Right.
So that's been that's where, the thing that has kind of impacted me now, that, just the fact that, I was there for a reason.
Yeah.
And the events that got me there, one of the fellows that trained us, and then contacted, afterwards, talked about the butterfly effect of, how everything led up to that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I had heard of that before, but as I had that discussion with him and then sat on my front porch and thought, just step back, that overwhelmed my mind. Like, this event back in 1982, what effect did that have on me being here,
Yeah.
So, man, hopefully we can do some good to help inspire. It's, it's what it's about now.
Yeah. So I have to ask, did you feel like you needed, or did you receive any sort of counseling or mental health support afterwards, for especially when you thought for sure you were the one that this whole thing fell on, for taking somebody's life? I mean, that, especially for a Christian, I know that that's gotta take its toll on, there's so many different layers to that I can't imagine, having never had to be put in that position. But there are many who, there might be many who listen to this podcast, and eventually someday down the road they do have to go through something like that. What can they expect, and is there what would you recommend for mental well-being?
I have not gone to seek any counseling on what had happened. And there's, I've talked with counselors, not as counseling for that.
Right.
There was a lot of support to our church for weeks afterwards. There was counselors that would be there. And they brought in dogs for the kids to play with, and we had a lot of support. And so, I've not sat down. I found, like I said, I was as I gave interviews and stuff, I was hearing things. I was saying things, and I was hearing things, and I don't know. There are counselors that say, it may take a while before that causes. any long term. I'm, as of now, when I say that I think I was put in that position for a reason, I was chosen. We were chosen to be there. I don't know that I'm not. I don't know. It's. I feel for the parents. And I don't know that how I could ever get away from that. How much you talk about it. Yeah, I'm just. So far, I haven't had to deal with, and it could be part of what we discussed, a few minutes ago about not knowing the who did what,
Right.
But it's something I'll, I know that, I'll take to the grave.
Right.
That I knew that I was involved in, but I also know that, a lot of people were saved that day.
And it sounds like you do have a very strong support system with your church and the
Oh,
other
yeah.
people around you.
Yeah.
I mean, even the officers that were on scene, it sounds like. So is that something that maybe if it starts weighing too heavily, it sounds like
Yeah.
you have somebody that you
Oh,
can
yeah.
talk to,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, no. And even I was several weeks, month or two, whatever, after the event. There was a event in Wayne where we attended, and I spoke with the officer that I ended up spending most of the day with from Wayne. And she told me how that week after that happened, how affected she was with what had happened and how we handled it. And she said she could not wait to get to church the following Sunday and give a testimony to what she had seen and how we had handled it and how the people had come together and
Yeah.
she told me, she says, I'll never forget that day, and I will never forget dealing with you, your church, and you and the other people that were there, and how you folks handled it, and just she says how everything went, and just talking to the people, and she's like, she says, I'll never forget that.
That's pretty awesome, to be honest. And the fact that she uses it as a testimony, I think that says a lot too.
Yeah, to share, to share with her church. Yeah, she felt that she had to share it.
Yeah. How long did it take for you to return to church or resume your security role? Did you do that like the very following week, especially the security role, or did you need a little bit of break time, downtime,
Well,
I guess?
like I said, we were back up there 10:30 that night, retrieving cars and purses and stuff. I had a chance to see some people. I actually was back up there at 7 o'clock the next morning because I wanted to see if I could review the security footage.
Right.
Not even sure that our monitor would be there. I didn't know what
If they took the
I didn't know
entire-
if they
yeah.
just grab that whole thing and take it with them.
Right.
So, and no, it was every day I was up there. We were doing something, getting the place cleaned back up.
Right. So right back to work,
Right
essentially.
back to it.
Yeah.
The following Sunday, we all made effort to be in service.
Right.
My wife made sure of it. We were all mic'd up, but law enforcement was there. Other churches, people that we knew, came in to help with security. But no, it was right back to it. You know, we had law enforcement would hang out in the parking lot they were there for 3-4 weeks, and then patrol, make a drive by.
Right. Probably making sure that there wasn't some retribution or anything like that.
Yeah, and and that was a thought. Who's gonna try and say, well, that guy didn't do it, but I can.
Right.
But they, and I don't know, just they made their presence known. Wayne did for quite a while afterwards.
That's awesome.
And well, they were very supportive. Everybody, the mayor, I talked with him.
Did he give you a
times.
key to the city?
No, didn't get a key to the city. Got my picture on the paper though.
Well, there you go.
We got our picture on the cover of the Wayne Dispatch, and they did several articles, and it was Wayne, City of Wayne. I can't thank them enough for all they did. They brought in buses, bussed our people down to the Hype Center to get them out of the heat into the AC and got them taken care of down there.
You guys were just all over my house. I literally live on Howe Road, like maybe a few houses from the Hype Center and right down the road from the police station.
Yeah.
So like you were all over my house,
Yeah.
the area of my house.
So no, they were, John was on site fairly quick from what I understand, the mayor, and I saw interviews with them there, and I believe they brought in school buses and local transit buses and the neighbors on the east side of the building there. They were coming through their fences and bringing snacks, and some people had gone out through the woods, and there's poison ivy out there, so there was a guy who came looking for people who might have been out there so he could get, he had soap for that, and offering to let people dangle their feet in the pool and cool off, and from what I understand, they were, getting water and snacks from up and down the street, and then they brought the buses down that street and ran everybody out through that through their backyards out to the buses, and so the neighbors were awesome.
That's cool.
Just another part of how well things went that day, as far as the response.
So what kind of emotions did your family go through in the aftermath? Like, how did this affect them? Like you mentioned your wife, or how your family and people super close to you that watch what you're going through, not just while you're at church, but at home, and watching how you're dealing with things.
So, my daughter was coming off the stage, so she wasn't right there with my wife. Mm-hmm. My wife had eyes on her when the noise started happening, and then people started heading out. So she wasn't right there with her.
Right.
My son normally is in the praise band. He wasn't there that day. My oldest daughter was there by my wife, and her in-laws were also there. No, her in-laws were not there. They were camping. But I guess they headed out, and my wife, she didn't wait for my daughter, because she said she was there, and then she was gone, and she'd kind of ducked down, and then I guess ran across chairs. She had gone in with people we knew, and headed out with them. She caught up with her somewhere along the line, and then my oldest daughter. she said she knew where I was. She didn't know how I was.
Right.
She knew that I would have, because I wasn't with her. She was, from me to the end of that table up into the sanctuary, away from where I was standing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
she knew where I went. She didn't know, she knew where I was. She didn't know how I was how she put it. And then I came out and spoke to them. Now my son-in-law, same thing. He was standing next to me. He ended up out there. So, my oldest daughter, she don't know where her husband is either.
Right.
But once they knew everybody was okay, my wife has had a few instances where she's been in situations that have made her uncomfortable. There's been several things that we've done at church that bring back, another episode or another event that has all the kids on the stage. That's because that's when everything happened last time.
Right.
And, so there's certain things that bring a little bit of angst. And there was another situation one day at our church that affected her. And I'm not going to open up any of that. I don't need to let more people know what goes on over there.
Yeah.
And that was before the end of the year, that raised a lot of eyebrows and caused some stuff to happen that day. So there are events, and she's talked to some people and done counseling and stuff. My youngest, they had some group counseling for the kids.
Yeah.
She went to one or two of those. And I think maybe she's had several things that have, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but, have made her a little bit.
Squeamish.
Yeah. But there's stuff that, make us all that way.
Right.
There's been several times where there's been stuff that's kind of made me,
Yeah.
raise the hair on my back of my neck a little bit.
More so than would have prior to the incident.
Yeah. I was actually at one of the gun shops, and there was a very rapid fire sound came out of one of the ranges, which I didn't normally think you'd hear at a range, at most ranges.
No.
But that stopped me.
Yeah.
That was the first time I had heard that noise since that event, and that stopped me. And I wasn't sure how I was going to feel going back into a range. Didn't seem to bother me too much, except for
With the exception of that.
hearing some rapid fire.
Right.
I'm not super fond of.
Yeah.
But an impact gun at work one day, it's kind of like, oh yeah, there's that kind of noise again,
Yeah.
But there's seen some people that but besides that, I haven't had too much. It doesn't haunt my dreams or anything like that.
Right.
I'm not. I've always had kind of. It seems like in the last few years, it's just kind of weird dreams. Of how daily events that don't coincide with each other kind of jumble up into my brain, and I remember the week afterwards not having any of that and sleeping through the night. I think it just, I don't know if it reset my brain or what, but people are like, have you been able to get to sleep? And I'm like, and I remember thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, actually I've been sleeping pretty good, and those goofy dreams that I always had, you know, or I haven't had any of them, you know, and so yeah, it doesn't really seem like
Been too bad.
it's weird, you know, and it's kind of one of those deals where is it not processing? Have I processed it and I'm just over it? You know, my days at work are, you know, normally sure terror as it is. Maybe I'm tolerant to it. I don't know. Driving down the road 14 foot wide and way too tall and dealing with stuff like I've been doing for 40 years, you know, has a pretty good tolerance of chaos
Right.
in my life. So, you know, I don't, I gotta get pretty weird to, you know, raise the hair, you know, or make it. So I don't know. I guess that's be time will tell where all that lands.
Did you have you had any you done a few interviews? Have you had any media challenges or misinformation that you've had to navigate surrounding the surrounding the situation?
I haven't had anybody call me out on anything.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't. The early reports that went out that day,
Yeah, you were saying
you know, they're still out there,
that. Yeah.
and you know they didn't get corrected. You know, originally they said somebody drove a truck into the building, and you know that.
Yeah, that was among the first things I had heard
Yeah.
because, and I think maybe because what did you say, your deacon?
Yeah,
Who,
was right up there. You know,
Right.
the initial report was a guy with a gun. He has a silver vehicle. Well, then Richard runs him down with a silver vehicle, and there's gunfire right out in front of the place.
yeah,
Makes perfect sense.
Right.
Now, if you start going through, you Google the event, all those first initial reports that came out, and all of our internet experts on everything, you know, got the initial, and they were the one, they threw all those out, and so there's all that initial information.
right,
Nobody, all the interviews I did with local media, most people have been nothing but supportive,
Right.
and haven't spun anything in a way that, and I tried to be mindful that I wouldn't give them anything
right,
that they could, but they've been, there's nothing I've had to correct. There hasn't been much hate,
right,
you know, that I know directed right at me. Reading comments on YouTube videos and the newspaper or the TV interviews, and there were some that, you know, thou shalt not kill, no, you know,
Right.
why do you have guns in churches, and you know, there's that, but
yeah,
you know, and it's like you'd see some of the reports that were like, I don't understand why these people had guns in the church. Are you
Well.
reading the headlines? You know,
for this very reason.
yeah, are you reading the headlines? And so, no, I haven't experienced any real
Yeah.
negative.
And it sounds like even from public, because that was going to be my next question, is facing any sort of public criticism or misunderstanding about your actions. But it sounds like for the most part, and there's always going to be trolls out there regardless that just want to do this from their parents' basement behind, you know.
Yeah, there was a few of the experts
Yeah.
on the subject that were, you know, he talked too soon, which I probably did, but I think it also, you know, it's given me the platform to help spread the word on what goes on.
Right.
You know, there was some of the very well-known voices in church security and other things that, you know, you talk too soon. And, you know, I wasn't sure about that. And my lawyer was, you know, I discussed that with him. He's like, you know, I don't, you shouldn't have any problems.
Yeah.
It's pretty cut and dry. So, you know, and friends of mine, you know, same thing. I don't know if you should have talked so soon, but I think it helped bring it to light.
And it might have helped you a little bit too. I mean, talking about things.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know.
I think, yeah, looking back, now that you say that, yeah, it probably did. If I'd have been just wandering around the house, front yard, you know, trying to...
Stewing over it. And,
Yeah, the fact that I was able to discuss it, because like I said, I was saying things and hearing them for the first time,
Right.
and that was where I was, you know, that thought wasn't bouncing around in my head, it came out of my mouth, and then I heard it, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense, you know.
Right.
So I don't know you know, I don't know that I craved the media spotlight or anything. I'm just glad I had the opportunity to speak on the subject, and I still have. There's still organizations contacting me, and I've got some stuff lined up, and doing some stuff with USCCA, and still, and.
Yeah, I think that organization that was there at the thing that I presented at, they said, now your church isn't a part of the, I forget what it's called, like security leaders or something like.
Yeah, Security Leaders Coalition or something.
Yeah,
like
like
that.
he said he knew you, like, or no, it wasn't him that said he knew you, but I think he said your church hadn't joined it yet, or something.
Yeah.
Is that something you guys are thinking about or looking into, or?
What we did, I was contacted right after, fairly quickly after. People I knew who attended other churches, I think one time they used to attend our church, still in contact with members of our safety team, lifelong friends,
Yeah.
do security at other churches. 3 guys who all used to go to the same church, ended up at different churches, but they all ended up on security, and they would meet, you know, and have breakfast every once in a while, and said, you know, we should get a organization together of local churches.
And that's what you and
discuss.
I had been talking about too.
And so, as soon as our event happened, they all said, we need to get that coalition together.
Yeah.
And he called me, and I'm like, hey, I'm in, you know. So now we have this Western Wayne coalition going, and it has proven valuable so far. And sharing information about things that are happening. And, you know, we've had this happen. They've seen these guys casing the joint, you know, and that information is sharing, and it's a really good tool. So we have a local.
Which, by the way, I'm still waiting for you guys to get in touch with me for the next meeting.
Yeah. We had one not too long ago.
You should have let me know. That's all right.
Are you not in the group?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think we had talked about it, and what happened was
You didn't
one of the
make it
meeting.
at that meeting.
Yeah, I wasn't able to make it to the meeting, and so.
Yeah. But no, the one that you're talking about is like a Michigan based, and they're out of
Yeah,
Troy. I didn't contact them to get.
And there is a cost for it, but what they said, what I got from them at the meeting was that it's not an individual that joins, it's a church that joins, and they pick only, I think it's like 100 a year or something like that, but you can pick like 2 or 3 members that will attend the meetings, but it's an overall thing. So I've got a safety team meeting with my team coming up, I believe next week, not next week, but the following week, and I'm gonna bring it up with them, see if that's something they wanted to.
So I've had invites for this and that, you know, and I, you know, life is busy.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I would love to be involved with everybody, but there's just not the time of the day, you know. And with us having this local one of churches of people I know, close, and there's I was unaware of how much information and how many associations and coalitions and stuff that actually were available
Right.
to churches. How much information, how much training, and I think there's been quite a bit more in the last year that
Yeah.
has come available. I didn't realize that law enforcement and the FBI had such statistics on stuff. And Westland put on a church safety day back in early December.
Mhm.
And the FBI was actually there and
Mhm.
talked about profiles of active shooters.
Yeah.
Very, very informative. I did not attend the class. I wish I would have.
Right.
From the people who were there and attended it, I missed out. So there is a ton of information out there. The Faith-Based Security Network is, a nationwide organization,
Yeah.
and they have conferences all over.
Yeah.
They were doing one this month. I think it was Midwest something. They have one coming up in March in Grand Rapids, and I'm going to actually go speak at that one. Several of us from the church are going out to speak at that.
Let me know when that is. I might have to go up there, although I try to avoid Grand Rapids as much as possible.
Right, yeah. And then, the one there, 21st, there's another one out near Grand Rapids this month.
Yeah,
there's-
I think, what's his
Yeah.
name, sent me a link to that.
Yeah, so there's, I was unaware, I wasn't involved in the building of this, our safety team.
Right.
I kind of came in, as a member, and then kind of fell into leadership of it, with, a fairly comfortable team, and just never realized how much information was out there for us.
Right.
And I'm not a guy who likes to, statistic myself to death with all that stuff. And there are some things I'd like to learn. This faith-based security network, they've been gathering statistics for 22 years on violence against churches, and so I believe I'm going to end up with a membership with them, and
Will you send me the information
I can
on?
try to figure that out.
Yeah, 'cause
And they
I thought I had a pen on me, but
Yeah.
apparently. Oh wait, duh,
they
pen case.
literally, as I talked to the woman and was kind of discussing our event, I told her, I said, I'm not sure if you know how this went, and she says, no, I'm very well with it, because she was the statistician, and they, so she had studied our event, what she had found out about it.
Oh wow.
So she was quite versed in. So they're very, and their president has been involved in 2 different instances of violence against Christians.
Talk about bad luck. It almost makes you wonder if maybe.
Yeah. So and very well publicized.
Right. Right.
So I've actually he actually called and talked to me a while back and talked to me about presenting with them.
So a lot of these questions that I have, we've already kind of gone over, like legal investigations, or being called to testify if it's over, then obviously that's not going to happen. And we kind of went over a little bit, but if you want to add to it how your faith or belief system helped you to process the aftermath. I imagine that.
Yeah, it's, I'm just, leaned on, the fact that, one, God's hand of protection that day, that, Ron was hurt. Yeah, he was hurt, and he's still suffering.
Is it,
But it wasn't-
I meant to ask, like, how severe. I know people think, oh, he got hit in the leg. That's not a big deal. He can get right back to it. But I mean, there's a lot of arteries, a lot of muscles. I mean, it could be.
It shattered the big bone pretty hard, and it broke the little bone. It actually just like disintegrated a good chunk of his bone. And he had to have a rod and stuff in it. And actually, it started to heal up pretty good. But he's since had a lot of pain, and they think maybe there was further damage in the knee joint that they didn't realize at first. So
Right.
he's dealing with that. Still using a cane and in a lot of pain. I teased him that he was just too fast for God's hand to cover both legs at the same time. And just, the fact that, how we've been led to do this, and, for all those years of faithful service and, for years, if it got down to the end of the meeting and I prayed at the end of the meeting, I'd always say, thank you, Lord, for all you've done for us, for all this information, and hopefully 20 years from now, when we're no longer on this, when we can't be on this team, serve, but we all look back on all of this time we spend training and planning as good fellowship. And well, I guess that's a prayer that won't get answered now. I mean, it'll always be good fellowship.
Right.
The initial thought, that we did have to use all of that
Training.
and just how much we were blessed with safety and just the people that came around us. It's just a blessing. Just the I'm just so blown away at the thought of it all,
Yeah.
And just, I just continue in the faith and pray that we never have to go through it again, yeah.
Did your church have to make, or did they make any policy or training changes after the event as a result of the event? Like, was there anything that you guys realized, oh, hey, all this worked, but you did mention one of the things, being out in the parking lot a lot more often. Was there anything else besides that?
As far as the safety team, we haven't sat down and said, we need to change this policy because of what happened.
Right.
Besides more eyes and ears on the parking lot.
Yeah.
The church did discontinue live streaming our service. We used to live stream our service.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that video of our kids running and all the people running out of the sanctuary,
Yeah.
that's how that got out, because that happened live on YouTube.
Right.
The incident in our church happened live on YouTube, and that video ran for hours, a couple hours before we were able to get it shut down. We couldn't get back in the church to shut it down. they actually had to contact someone who used to be involved with our tech, who had moved away, and they were able to remotely get in and shut down our YouTube feed.
Right.
That's been the biggest, one of the biggest things is that live feed. And I've heard that discussed in several occasions on whether people think you should have a live feed because it would give somebody
Audience.
a
larger
opportunity
audience.
to make their actions seen. So,
You know, I had never, and this is exactly why I'm glad that we're doing this today, because that never occurred to me. But that is a very valid point. There, unfortunately, in some ways, it could possibly make you more of a target, especially to churches that don't carry if they're doing a live feed, because that just says, hey, come be famous.
yeah. And because if it goes out there, you'll never get it to go away.
Right.
You'll never wipe it from the internet.
Yeah.
It'll always be out there. And then there's been a few things that.
And you don't have to give me like
we're
all
not
the
gonna-
details.
Yeah, we're not gonna go into, policy changes and all
Right.
that stuff. That's the evident one.
Right.
And that we no longer, so it's usually the next day or so before our services. It's still taped, and it still goes on YouTube. It's just not live streamed.
Right.
And it still has the worst sound that you could ever. It's embarrassing. I'm sorry.
Every church has something, whether it's sound, video quality, there's always something.
My apologies to any leadership, but we know that our sound is, there's something it doesn't. And
Right.
because I remember the first time my son got up and sang, and I never watched it on YouTube because I was always there.
Right.
And my son plays drums, but then sometimes leads. And I remember watching it and going, oh, this sounds horrible. I don't even want to call my family and tell them to listen to it because it sounds too bad. Honest, it sounds better in person.
And it usually does. Like my wife, she sings on the platform, but then she has she does a children's class, and so she doesn't have to do it with singing. Number one, because she's up on the platform, but number two, because she's in the church for that part. But as far as the messages, she always has to go back and watch it because she's busy with the kids.
And that's nice for the people that serve. They can go back and watch the messages, and I'll try and stream them sometimes and listen to them while I'm driving on the road.
Yeah. So, how has this experience changed your outlook on armed security in houses of worship? Has it made it stronger?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I firmly believe that everybody should have, but I also think we should have armed security guards in schools too.
Yeah.
That it seems like an age-old argument now. It's like we protect our churches and banks and sports arenas and everything like that.
Yeah.
But we won't protect our kids in our schools with.
And even the church, a lot of the churches we don't. I mean,
Right.
Here in Michigan, you have to have special permission from leadership in order to be able to carry. If my pastor said, no, you guys can't carry, then if I do, I'm breaking the law right there,
Right. But we all know there are people that you know and love, but you would not want them to have a firearm.
I can think of a few.
So that goes into, well, it's you're right. I know, but you're not somebody I want to.
Yeah.
So but I do think that I'm torn. I still hate the fact that we have to lock the door.
Yeah.
More or less carry firearms. The thought that we have to lock the door to keep people that might want to come and disrupt or harm us in our church services, is sad. I'm as old school as it gets. I remember, they say that, nobody would ever think of doing anything wrong in a church. You wouldn't even.
It used to be
a
sanctuary
on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And now the fact that they're under attack in multiple different ways, that just, I believe, as much as I hate to say it, you should have some sort of defense. It's your duty to protect the people that come to worship there.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but it is, and it's part of the just the way the world is now, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I've often said that there was a time when it was considered a safe place, even by criminals. Like, when there was a mafia, they respected the church
Right.
boundaries,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And there, even in the movie, I know it's a fictional movie, but The Godfather, you see like where they respected that boundary. And yes, it was a fictional movie, but it was a direct reflection of how it really was. And
nobody would ever think to do anything. They never locked the doors, even when people weren't there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, on that note, what do you wish more church leaders understood about the realities of church security and safety?
That's an interesting one. First, I wish that they would realize that it's needed.
Yeah.
And you need to do it for your people. The leaders of the church are there for your spiritual well-being, but you need somebody to protect them physically. And like I said, there are many ways. You can lock the doors, but that just goes against most people's hearts for their church. You can try and put together a team. Hopefully there's somebody in your church that will have that initiative, have the skill, the mindset, and that there are people that are willing to be led. And it's an initial investment to get all those people on the same page and to make sure they're trained up well, because you need people that are trained up well.
Yeah.
You don't need the guy who just went and got a CPL last week. You need somebody who has the mindset to get the training before they even go to security. They need to know how to use a firearm and be comfortable with it, and have the mindset to protect.
Yeah.
But to stay diligent in their training, not just in firing, on how to handle their firearm and how to interact with people.
Right.
They have to have I've heard it many times. You don't want the person that says, "Hey, I got a gun, I want to be on the security team." That's not the guy you want.
I have talked about that so many times in podcasts and blogs, and in fact, I'm working on a book right now, and that's one of my biggest things. I will often say my biggest red flag is somebody that's a little too eager to carry a firearm, and that seems to be their main goal, especially when they're refusing to train or go to any trainings. Just because you have a firearm does not mean you belong on the team. You need to show that you know how to handle it and are safe with it. And I mean, there's a lot of other things that go into it, but yeah.
We had a training years ago that it was a situational scenario training. And yeah, our guy came in and the first thing he did was pull out the gun and started blasting. And it was like, all right, he'll never be on the safety team.
Yeah.
You know, it was, and it was just a cert, you know, was what he was carrying was a cert pistol, but, you know, it came right out and was immediately put into use. So it's like, that's not how we do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got to have a team that one works together. You can't have any dissension. You got to have people that you know are very like-minded. And support them with what they need to at least get started and get the equipment they need to train and get people in and give them the right mindset
Right.
to begin with.
Yeah.
And then start basic and build.
Yeah.
Start basic and build. I'm seeing with a lot of the information that's out here now on starting safety teams are very complex and look like they can be very overwhelming. And to, you know, you just start basic and almost grow it organically. Let the team build itself. Give them the opportunity to seek their training. You know, there's a lot of stuff now that's available that I didn't know was available as our team grew.
Yeah, well, you know, it doesn't matter how many connections I make, how many people I reach out to. I'm still finding that I'm learning almost daily how much is out there and finding new different avenues that even when I initially started researching, and I think part of it is because there are a lot of new ones too.
Right.
You know, and you know, you were talking about how a lot has popped up just since your incident. When I started this venture, this whole thing with the podcasting and the website and everything, when I started working with Brian, it was not that long before your incident happened. But we kind of dragged our feet, you know, we really weren't, I mean, we were motivated, don't get me wrong, but we had, you know, the rest of our stuff going on in our lives.
Yeah.
And so we weren't pushing super hard. As soon as that happened, that was like a slap.
You didn't have the kick in the pants.
Right. That was absolutely a slap in the face to wake up and say, get this going now.
Because it's close to home.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really, really close to home.
I mean-
I think that's why we saw so many participants in those Protect Your House of Worship classes around here,
Yeah.
because it was very close to home.
Right.
And then, you know, several months later, Grand Blanc.
Right.
And so that's two incidents right here within 50 miles of each other that really, really lit the fire under some people in
Yeah.
Southeast Michigan.
Which, you know, it's like the silver lining to that gray cloud. That I think it was necessary to light that fire for certain people, you know, and get this kind of thing. Before we wrap up, I'd like to kind of look at a broader picture about what you've seen in the congregation and safety teams since the incident, not just about your personal experiences, but what you've seen overall, and also what you may or may not have learned about the attacker. So, like, what kind of changes have you observed in the congregation's overall sense, the congregation's overall sense of alertness or caution or confidence since the incident?
I think people are more alert. I think, unfortunately, strangers might get
A little more.
eyeballed a little bit more.
Right.
But there definitely is a heightened sense
Yeah.
of what goes on, and I think some of it may be fear,
Right.
some of it may be actual situational awareness,
Right.
which I want the situational awareness.
Absolutely.
I don't want them there in fear.
Right. And that, I mean, that's a great thing. That can only help your safety team out if general population, for lack of a better term, has that situational awareness that they didn't have before. So, I mean, I guess that is kind of a positive outcome of this too.
Yeah. But overall, seems, there was, I don't want to say a cloud, but it was there.
Right.
I think it's lightening some.
Would you say people are more engaged now, or less, or more standoffish, or?
No. I do believe that the congregation is, as we discussed earlier, is closer.
Right.
I do think there is definitely
Yeah.
more closer. So, and the team is I know several of us on the team have grown a lot closer.
Right.
I have more people miking up every Sunday,
Right.
just whether they're on or not, and the team is definitely at a higher level of alertness. We always were, okay, we can't just be standing around shooting the breeze, and that might have slacked for a while, but now I know people are definitely on the alert.
Now, do you think that as more time goes on, do you think that will kind of ease off a little bit? I'm not saying completely to the same amount it was prior to the incident, but do you think it'll kind of ease down a bit?
I don't think it will in the safety team. I think that it'll be a long time. It'll be a long time. I don't want to say we're hyper vigilant, if that's the correct term, but I mean, there's definitely
That,
on point,
Right.
and the congregation, I don't know. I know there was a lot of things said, and I'd see somebody and get a hug every time,
Yeah.
and that stuff has the attention I was getting from people all the time has gone down and made it a little bit more normal.
Right.
But I don't think it'll ever go away.
Right.
For the people that were there, and I don't know. I don't know if the younger kids are gonna forget. Because they had to explain to 2 and 3 year olds what just happened.
Yeah.
And it stuck with them for a while. There was a young, cutest little kid, and I'd see him as they were walking out, and he'd say, "That's the guy that saved us, right?" And I remember hearing that a couple times as he walked by, because that must have been what his parents told him, you know. I haven't heard him say that lately, but, you know, so maybe he's forgetting, maybe it's, you know, but there are kids who, you know, teenagers and younger kids who are still very traumatized.
Yeah.
So will we ever get back to normalcy?
Probably
Maybe a new
not.
normal,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
Did you happen to see, like, were there more people that got interested in possibly getting a CPL or getting a firearm after the incident that you wouldn't normally expect to do something like that? That you know of anyway?
One or two who, like the one guy I'm thinking of right now, I'm surprised I don't know, I think he had a CPL. It was the insurance that he didn't have. Nobody has come to me directly and said that I went and got a firearm because of that.
Well, if anybody does, you said you have people that do firearms instruction. All right.
Well, I'm actually a certified instructor.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say
yeah.
Brian is, but if you
no, we do have a couple guys on the team who I know the one guy had been talking about it. He did go and get his,
yeah,
but he hasn't really done a lot with it.
right,
Because unfortunately, we told him, go get your CPL and then come see us and we'll teach you how to do it right. And we haven't spent a lot of time with him. And then there's, I think, another team member who was thinking about it. But with what, you know, and I don't even believe this was true when I started, because I started carrying when the team started.
yeah,
And I don't know that I had the level of training I would want back then that I would want people to have now when they started.
right,
Because we as a team, even the fellas who were very well were versed, you know, I'd say in
Yeah.
firearms and firearm handling, didn't have the level of training that we then attained through the people that came to us,
right,
or the opportunities that we had to go other places
Yeah.
and train at world class level places, and so yeah, I don't know. I haven't had a lot of people come to me that said, you know, I want a gun now because
Right.
of what happened.
right. And it may happen, but that you're unaware of too.
Right.
So,
They, you know, not necessarily that they would come to us.
right.
You'd think they would.
you would hope. So about the attacker, what information have you learned about their connection with the church, like past attendance or family ties or prior interactions? Do you have any information about that?
So it would have been, I believe, in the fall of 24.
Mm-hmm.
His mother, I know his mother was baptized at our church.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard people say she was a member. I don't know if she ever was an actual
Member.
member,
Right.
or how much his father attended. I did not recognize them. I don't ever remember interacting with the man, but he had been to our church. Like I said,
Right.
his parents were there for a while. His mom was baptized there recently.
Right.
He had several meetings with our pastor.
So your pastor knew him then, at the very least.
He believed he was being spoken to by God, and you know, I'm a prophet type stuff.
Mm.
And he had
several occasions come to the church during the week and had conversations with our pastor. Our pastor said there was no ill will, no fighting about, no, you're not,
Right.
Bobby explained to him, what he thought, told him what he, you're probably not a problem, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But they ended their conversations on good terms as far as we knew.
Right.
I do not know if, I never thought to ask, whether the pastor knew it was him at the time. I don't remember. I don't have a clear picture of his face
Right.
in my head after the incident. I don't remember. My brain doesn't give me a real clear picture of him even there on the ground. I remember taking the firearms off of him. I remember using tactical gear, but I don't know that I ever looked him in the face.
Right.
Pictures I see do not ring a bell.
And that may not necessarily be a bad thing because it kind of leaves it anonymous.
Right. So, but like I said, I don't, it's my job to see people there. I don't, from the one or two pictures I saw of his folks, don't ring a bell.
Right.
So, yes, they did have an association with the church.
Mm.
And he had been there. And from what I understand, both times he had been there, he had walked to the front doors and knocked on the doors to be let in that day. And that's not normally, if somebody was coming to the church, it's not normally where they would come.
Right.
There's a door with a bell that you'd ring to be let in. And so, he had knocked on the doors and had to be let in both times. So they may think that's why he came to that door.
Yeah.
I don't know that there was ever intentions that I know of.
Right.
I haven't been told. Like I said, I haven't read the report. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to, but I was never given. I don't know that if there was a note or a manifesto or anything he left behind.
Right. Well, that was actually going to be my next question. If you knew anything about a motive or any planning that led up to it.
I don't know. There was. I had heard something secondhand that possibly he was. I'd heard several things secondhand, but I'm not going to go into them. Because I'm not, like I said, they were secondhand.
Right.
And I don't want to, out of respect for the family.
Yeah.
I'm like I said, I'm not sure factual, but
Right.
yeah.
Well, and that's fine. Like,
we're all here in the same community, so I don't want to start
No.
anything. And like I said, I still feel for the family.
yeah. And that's where a lot of the real tragedy is with the family that lost someone for whatever reason it was, which really ultimately in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter what the reason, what the motive. In the end, it's still the same result.
Yeah, so it's, I'm unaware of anything past that with them, and I just, my heart goes out to them.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a moment, Jay, to sincerely thank you for coming out and sharing your story with us today. I know it's not easy to revisit some of these moments, like the one that you faced, moments that the rest of us obviously can't even imagine not having been in that kind of a situation. Your honesty and willingness to walk us through both the preparation and the aftermath give incredible insight to others who stand ready to protect their own congregations. It's one thing to talk about training or readiness on paper, but it's something entirely different to hear it from somebody who's lived through it. Your courage, your humility, and your continued commitment to helping others learn from your experience mean more than words can express. And I know that's all written down on that paper, but I absolutely mean every word I'm saying, Jay. So I want you to know that, and I do truly want to thank you for this. And also, to everybody listening, I hope today's conversation challenges you to think more deeply about what it really means to serve and protect in faith-based environments. Church security isn't just about carrying a weapon. It's about stewardship, responsibility, and the readiness of mind and heart. If there's one takeaway from Jay's story, it's that preparation saves lives, but compassion and community can help heal afterwards. Whether you're part of a security team, church leadership, or simply someone who wants your place of worship to be safer, take what you've heard today as encouragement to start conversations, get training, and build teams that operate with both skill and grace. This has been another episode of Sanctuary Peacemakers. I want to thank you all for joining, and my name is Unity, or Justin, if you want to call me that. And I want to thank you again for joining me and learning from the real stories with real lessons.